So, to answer Save Children UK, so I'm going to have a little bit of an explanation about Save Children and what we do, because I think the structure and the way we work is quite important from the kind of concepts of blockchain and how we might look to apply that. So we are a global movement of 30 to 40 member countries, which means we are all independent, so we have our own chief execs, own CFOs, etc., all working together collaboratively in the delivery of a global strategy that we've got. So we all work on that together. So no structure in that sense. We are a federated, distributed organisation. So the good bit for us is, we do lots of good in the day-to-day work that we do. But my role in technology is to look at how can we make ourselves more efficient and more effective. Because ultimately, what we need to do is maximise our impact for children at the end of the day. So we've been looking at blockchain for a while, just thinking of use cases. Now, if you believed everything you read, blockchain can solve absolutely every problem there is in the world, which clearly isn't the case. But I think it's important for us to explore the opportunities that can help us with, and some of the solutions and problems it can help us to solve. So we've looked at a range of things, from philanthropy, so how might that work in a smart contracting situation, for example, with our corporate partnerships, is there something we can do there? Through the supply chain, we move lots of equipment and goods and services all around the world on a daily basis, and when you're working in fragile states, fraud, provenance, access to a history of transactions, records, all that kind of stuff, potential use cases as well. But the three that we're really looking to progress at the moment, and one is a little bit more advanced than others, so something around fundraising and transparency. So how do we be more transparent, or how do we give some more transparency to the donations that we get on aggregate? So where's that money going? What are we doing with that? How do we know that it's made an impact? So at the moment we have lots of monitoring and evaluation systems linked into finance systems at a fairly granular level. How do we then present that back out, and how do you know as an individual donating your £5, £10, whatever it may be, or raising money for running the marathon, what's happening to that? So that's one we're exploring. I think there's an interesting kind of dilemma there around how open and how transparent people need to be on that. And also, does that move funding into the more restricted route rather than the unrestricted, which is, for those that are unrestricted, is the money that we can spend on what we like, whereas if you're giving £5 and say spend that on a Syria campaign, that's restricted and I have to spend it on that and show that value. So if it pushes more into restricted, then there's a question of overheads and how do you manage it and how do you run as an organisation. So that's one other use case. The other one for us is cash transfers. So globally we're a $2.5 billion organisation, UK £400 million turnover. So on the annual basis, we're transferring several hundreds of millions of pounds every year, which attract transaction fees, costs, etc. So is there a method in which we can use blockchain to make that more efficient? So again, the money is going further to the front line than it currently does in that case. That's an interesting one again, because at scale we need to look at how we adopt and how we might apply that. So how do we do that on a smaller scale than just trying to bite off and boil the ocean and try and do that en masse across the whole movement? So we're looking at ways in which we might be able to apply that on particular use cases. So the third one, the one which is most advanced for us at the moment, is around child safeguarding. So we work with our child safeguarding director. We have an issue in emergency lands that we need to deploy staff, and we need to deploy people that we have in our network to help us out in those situations. So at the moment, our child safeguarding director describes it as this kind of unbearable conflict. You have a group of people that you need to deploy to be able to make some impact in that emergency situation. If they're not known to us and they're not checked, we've got two choices. We either deploy them and potentially put children at risk, or we wait for those checks to come back. So what we're looking at doing is, can we develop an identity-based solution where people can register, pre-register, and we can verify that they are a doctor, we can verify that they've had their DBS check, so that when that comes to the point of deployment, we know who they are and we know that they're safe to be deployed in that situation. And the reason we think blockchain suits for that is because we operate in this kind of semi-untrusted environment, because we are separate legal entities with separate processes going on, and we don't know whether those checks have actually been verified in other countries when we're looking at a register of people to deploy. So at the moment that kind of relies on basically an emergency deployment spreadsheet. which you can imagine that's open to all sorts of potential misuse there. So how can we make that more efficient and more effective so we're deploying the right people at the right time on the ground? So that was my whistle stop. Great tour of what we're doing. Keep you back on track from timelines.
Thank you, Karl.
Any? Do you want questions or wait to the end of it?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Karl.
Hello, thanks for the talk. I'm curious, are Save the Children not terrified that blockchain and donor to beneficiary relationships are going to really threaten international development charities with an all-time low in confidence and trust by the public in charities?
So I think this notion of disintermediation comes up quite a lot, and it's a topic of many a conversation. Are we going to be Ubered or whatever? Insert kind of organisation name here phrase. But I think for us, it's what we do at scale, and that's quite hard to replicate. So if we're running mass programs at scale, that's slightly different to maybe a child sponsorship type program. So I think that it's going to happen inevitably to some degree. But I think running a 5-10 year program to eradicate child deaths under fives, whether that's pneumonia or that's diarrhea, etc., that's a slightly different kind of construct to direct programming, direct sponsorship, I think. So I think there inevitably will be some movement in that area, but I think for us it is what we do at scale which is the difference.
Pigeon, can you tell us a bit more about that pigeon?
Yeah, it had a ring round its thing. I don't know whether it's blockchain enabled or not. But,
Thank you.
Sorry, Karl, even though you're in the third sector, you presumably still have a board that you have to justify these things to in some way.
Yeah.
I know you said you're not hierarchical now. How do you sell the idea of a blockchain solution versus anything else?
So I think it goes back to the point that was made earlier. Board don't really care what the technology is behind it. Well, should they care? Should they? I don't know. That's probably another debate. But for us, it's part of my role is to try and help and educate the board in terms of new technologies, different ways of doing things. So whether that's through pure disruption or just saying we want to do something in a different way. So there's regular briefings that we give back to the board of directors around what's happening in the kind of marketplace around AI, blockchain, IoT, and I think there's a convergence of all those things that are really going to help us. So that's on a local level. And then I think what we've discovered more recently is there are pockets of people trying to do the same thing in, say, New Zealand and in the US, trying to do some trials in Uganda, etc. So it's about building that community, and I think there's power in that voice of people coming up with business solutions to business problems, rather than saying, hey, look, we've got this blockchain stuff, what can it do for you? Because then you're into the conversation of what is blockchain and why is that different to anything else? Whereas if it is, there's a problem, we can solve it, and we're actually thinking in this way, that's what we're trying to turn the kind of conversation around to.
Very quickly, beyond the application for child safeguarding, have you looked at a role for blockchain in deployment of internal resource and people resource on internal projects and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, we're not going near that one at the moment because we've just embarked on a global rollout of an HR system. So, so I don't imagine I'd be very popular. Yeah, can't answer that one. Cheers.